know, well,
Right.
they've got the angst of driving, but then a lot of it is just the fact that the financial systems of people in general right now, with inflation, the cost of gas, just all sorts of things are causing people to really think about what is their exposure and what is it that they're actually committing to, and is there, and they want somebody to fix it for them, right? And so they might say, well, I don't really want my rates to go up if I get in an accident or something like that. I need some other sort of support, so and we've talked even within our village about, do we need to think about some sort of stipend for, a
Mhm.
gas reimbursement for folks, or some sort of something to kind of, not that that's really going to make a huge difference, but it's definitely something that makes people understand that you're listening to what their concerns are, right?
Well, I think let's start now. I think everybody's in the room. So my name's Erica Kennedy, and I'm the representative from WAVE to help moderate this group. Welcome to the Breakout. And then, as you know from the earlier session, Emily Van Loon is from Tacoma Park village of Tacoma Park, and she's had a lot of experience with insurance. As you know, she was the CFO at Sum, which is impressive, and has done other work with other nonprofits in this arena. Now, I thought it would be good to have different individuals introduce themselves quickly, just so that we know also what area, Virginia, Maryland, or DC, that you're coming from. And then we can open up the floor for questions from you all. Carolyn?
Sure. I'm Carolyn Rourke, and I'm with a village in Central Virginia called Link, stands for Lake of the Woods. And I've been with my village since the beginning. We're in our 7th year of operation. I did serve as the board chair for a couple of years. And during that time, I was responsible for insurance, such as that was. And I also serve on the WAVE board at this time.
Cheryl.
Yes, my name is Cheryl Malwo, and I'm with HAP, Hyattsville Aging in Place, and I've been a volunteer there for 3 or 4 years, and on the board for a couple of years. And my main duty at the moment is handling the phone tree, which is like herding cats.
Yes.
Okay, Sarah, who is going to have to leave us in a few.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Drexler, and I have been the executive director of Mount Vernon at Home since the end of February, so I'm still fairly new. One of the things that I'm really interested in is, we have a group of founding members of Mount Vernon at Home that are now in their 90s and do need transportation services. And I think to someone's point about how sometimes the volunteers sign up to be helpful, but then end up having much more to deal with than they're anticipating. So that piece of it is really of interest to me, and I'm really looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mary?
Hey there, I'm Mary Bloodworth. I'm the Director of Operations at Capitol Hill Village. And in that, I also deal with volunteers. And certainly one thing that's been on my mind is with the transportation issue, how much assistance you can give. We've cycled through a number of different iterations of no touch, light touch, that kind of thing. So that's it.
And Bill? You're on mute.
There we go. My name is Bill Sisolak. I'm a WAVE board member, and my wife and I are longtime members of Capitol Hill Village. I was a board member of the village, although that was quite a few years ago. I'm here mainly to just sit and listen because insurance is not something that I have with the village been involved with. So again, just to sit and listen and learn.
And then Linda, are you there? You're on mute. Okay, thank you. Still on mute. Recalcitrant buttons.
There you go.
Okay, all right. I'm Linda Smith and I'm from the Greater Stonegate Village. And we're in northern, I guess you'd say northern Silver Spring. Between, think between Randolph Road and New Hampshire, that area.
Okay. So thank you all. What I heard in just so the general discussion, and I think to Sarah's question as you're leaving, is how to manage transportation liability issues, and then what happens when the volunteer is being asked to do more. And I see how that becomes a slippery slope because you develop a relationship, your neighbor helping neighbor.
Yep.
And then your member's like, oh, that's my person and they're going to help me drive. But when you take me on a drive, I need to do another errand. Can you take me on another errand? And by the way, when you come in, could you please pick this up and move it? And those, I see a lot of nodding.
Yeah.
Okay. Emily, what do you recommend? And then let's have a discussion.
I mean, we at So Others Might Eat It Some, we often had this issue where, you know, you want a very a relationship to, you know, to form between you and the volunteer, you know, who you're serving, but at the same time that then expands into friendship and it expands into something that's way beyond what the organization has kind of tasked you to do. You know, I think this is where volunteer training is really important, and you have to really just not lay down the law, but you have to be very clear with your volunteers. This is what our insurance covers. You can always blame it on the insurance, right? You have to first off understand what your insurance will cover, right? But then you also have to be really clear with your volunteers. These are the list of services that we are covered to provide, right? And the risk of reaching beyond that, okay, is a big risk to the organization that puts the services that we provide to everybody in jeopardy, right? And say to the member also, make sure that when the member is, that you're constantly training the member, and you say to the volunteer, listen, if the member is asking for this or this or this, we really do not have it within our purview or our mission to cover that. All right. You have to alert me, and we will then get back to the member and say, we cannot provide those services, but this nonprofit might be able to help you. You know, you can check, maybe put a note out on your listserv, your local listserv, and see if anybody's willing, just a neighbor, a regular neighbor, but within the umbrella of the village, these are the services that we provide. And it sounds really harsh to do that, but it really is protecting the well-being of all the services that you provide to your members. And that is your job as part of the leadership of the village, is to protect the good of all, you know. So I think it really is a training thing and a constant communication and an understanding of what your policy will cover and what it won't cover. Did that help at all, Sarah?
That did. I think the other thing also is like people's health and mobility changing,
Yep,
in terms of the
yep.
volunteer,
Yep.
you know, maybe not feel comfortable transferring
Right.
someone.
Well,
So
yeah,
that,
yeah. You don't want somebody hurt. You don't want a volunteer hurt trying to pick up or support somebody that they can't support, right?
Mhm.
And again, I think that is where you have to be people's needs do change, right? And we're here to try to keep people in their homes as long as possible. But at some point that might not be possible, right?
Mhm.
And it
Mhm.
does nobody any good to become codependent with that person and delay that decision or that discussion that needs to happen, right? And so it is something, those kinds of increased mobility issues are the things that begin to alert people that a different care situation or maybe a housing
needed.
situation is needed, right? And so I think volunteers can be told that it really is being more helpful to make sure that the proper support is provided to that person. And you're not trained on how to lift somebody or to help with this mobility issue. And to protect the person and yourself, we need to get somebody that is trained in that area, right?
Sarah, one of
And
the
make that,
things that we did, I know you have to run, is the close communications with the volunteers. So that communication, so to bypass some of the issues is, we had a rule with our volunteers that every ride or every service has to be communicated to us, because what happens is the member gets a telephone number and then independently calls up the volunteer. And so there's services happening without being logged that you don't know about.
yeah.
So there's a real squirrely boundary here. And so what we had to impress upon our volunteers at training is let us know, if you get along, and always tell us if the volunteer wants to have, if the member wants another gig, always tell them you have to go through the village, and then the village will set it up. So we have it on record, and it protects the volunteer, right? And then that volunteer is always letting us know what's going on with that individual, and we're involved, that middle point. The other part is, and what Emily was talking about, is the progression of health. And that close communication with the volunteers is really integral, because they're the ones that are on the ground seeing that individual, the member. And they can say, I don't know, Frida, she's not looking as good. She was having trouble making those stairs. Or we've had a volunteer say, they wanted me to help, but I got to tell you, when I walked into that house, the house smelled like cat. The cat is not being taken care of. Or there, and so we're going, okay, so over time, the office knows that there's something going on. And so we'll have somebody, you sort of do an assessment and evaluate whether that individual is moving towards beyond, where we need to suggest that the village may not be able to assist them.
And
Right.
I can tell you, Sarah, that any insurance claim, if there ever was an insurance claim, the insurance agent would be asking for, show me a record where that ride was assigned. Show me how this really was a village covered event and not one that just somebody did on their own. So they would be asking for all of the records, the history that's in the database, and they likely would say, we're not covering this injury or this if it was done outside of the system of the village. Right.
So to your point, Emily, it really is, all of this is training, part of the training,
Yes,
really
exactly.
focusing all of this on training.
Yep. It really is training of both the member and the volunteer.
Right.
Of the member, of what they're able to ask for, and that constant reminder, and not only the member, but their caregiver or their daughter or their whatever, right? That's in contact with them, right?
Yeah. Thank
Emily,
you very much. I'm sorry I have to leave, but thank you. It was a great discussion.
All the best.
Emily, I wanted to follow up on what you just said, just to make sure I'm very clear on what you're saying. We often have a service where a member has asked to go to the bank, and then while on that service, they'll ask to stop at a couple of additional places, like maybe go to CVS or even go through Burger King. So are you saying that that those additional services, if they're not part of the official service request, that they could be a liability?
I'm saying that insurance companies are very cranky about covering losses, right? And they're going to look, I mean, I wouldn't say this in front of the insurance guys, but they just are. And I think that they're going to look for loopholes or whatever happens to say, okay, were you really on village duty or were you not, right? Now, if in fact, I mean, I think again, it's on the member. What we do in the village of Tacoma Park is we say to our member, we will only provide the ride that you have requested. And we're very clear about that. I'm sorry, but if you need additional XYZ, that will have to be another time, right? And part of that is safeguarding the time of the volunteer, right? Because they have signed up thinking that they're going to work for maybe an hour or 30 minutes, and then they might have childcare responsibilities at home, or they might have to let the dog out or something. And then all of a sudden they're going to get all stressed out because they're spending more time than they thought the ride was going to take, right? And so in the long run, it's better. So we just say we are only able to provide the ride that you have requested. And we just have made that a firm rule. Now, whether the insurance company is going to cover that, again, it then wanders off, right? Because they're going to ask for the records. And if the records said went to this, okay, but didn't say, pick up food on the way home or go through the drive-through or whatever, or, whatever, then they're going to question that, right?
So our volunteers typically report those additional stops after the service, and
Right.
it does get recorded in service
right.
after the fact.
And I think that's fine, but again, I would just be alert to that and start paying attention to what are those extra services they're asking, and is that mission creep and not really something that you guys within the village have kind of bought on to do, right?
Yeah.
Because that's another alert that it's just, you want to keep a hold of that.
And maybe it's just one individual.
Right.
And so when you deal with that individual again, when they set up a gig, a ride, well, Martha, are you going to also want to go to McDonald's or, and so let's put that in the ride, and then also when you do it in Club Express, give them the amount of time, the extra time when you're doing, you're logging your hours.
Right. I mean, I do think that if it happens once, it's important to go back to the member and say, now, we're trying to keep our records up to date, and it would be far better for you to think ahead of time about what it is that you're going to need, right? Instead of adding it at the, while we're in the car, right? Mm-hmm. Especially with the cost of gas these days. I mean, I think volunteers need to understand what they're signing on for.
Sure. So I have a question. So we were delivering fruits and vegetables from the farmer's market. And so when I went to this one lady's house, this neighbor, she often has additional little requests. So we didn't go anywhere in the car, but she had a couple of letters that she wanted me to mail at the post office. So I did that. Is that a problem?
I mean, I wouldn't think that's a problem in that, you on your way out the door, you just, go to find, even if you find a mailbox, you drop them in. I think it really gets to be a problem if somebody's lifting a piece of furniture, or they're asking you to, repair something or something, that is definitely, out of maybe your expertise or what your might be ability to do, right?
And it feels kind of nitpicky to me as the volunteer who is being asked to do something, even if it's to move this to or that, if I could move it, okay. That would feel nitpicky to say that, well, we have to go back to the HAP central contact and get that approved.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And it again, insurance is, you know,
Nitpicking.
insurance is something you never want to use, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's nitpicky until you think it's not that heavy, and then you push it, and all of a sudden you've thrown your back out,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So then it's not nitpicky anymore.
No,
So
no, no.
right, so who knows where that, we don't, I wish we had a crystal ball and we knew, but we don't, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, one of the things then what we're talking about, and what I know with other executive directors, we keep on hashing over. And going to your point, Cheryl, about kindness or,
Mhm.
assisting. One of the issues that is difficult is if you're, say, walking somebody to, you're doing a ride, and you're walking somebody to the doctor's office or walking them, taking them for a walk, and they fall over.
Mhm.
And then my understanding is that you are not to pick them up, and you're to call 911. That you're not supposed to pick up people if you're not trained. And so if the volunteer hurts themselves, or if the volunteer accidentally does more damage to the member, say, and shouldn't have picked them up. So, so this is very difficult. Emily, can you speak to us on this piece?
Well, I mean, I can say what we would do at So Others Might Eat at some, because we ran a senior summer camp in the summer, and took and still do take a bunch of seniors out for camp, once for a whole week, and inevitably somebody falls. Is we do not we wait for the paramedics to come. And it's just, you don't know when somebody has broken something, and a break then becomes a fracture, that goes through the skin when you try to lift them up, right? And so again, that was our procedure, right? Now, if the person wanted to could get up on their own, and all of a sudden say, oh no, I'm fine, I'm getting up, then, you would certainly want to report that to their emergency contact, that the person fell. You would want to make sure that whoever you have in the emergency contact list, somebody calls them and says, look, I just wanted to alert you, Mabel fell over today. She got herself right back up, but I just wanted to let you know in case something else happens, right? Because people can later get concussions and different things and seem fine, but they're not, right? So, I mean, we always encouraged people when they fell to just sit tight and let somebody come and check them out.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes, but your day could become very complicated as you
Well,
wait for 911 and all these
oh
other
no,
things.
I get that, and again, if the person pops right back up, for sure you need to report that person, the volunteer needs to report the fall, and somebody that handles the ride share needs to make sure that somebody in the family is called, right?
So I was very lucky a couple of years ago. I had a neighbor who was an OT, an occupational therapist. And we have several old people on our block, not with HAP or anything. And somebody fell. And so her advice immediately was, don't pick them up.
Right.
Don't try to pick them up. If they can, see if they can get up on their own. And if not, call 911, because even though she would know how to pick them up, the rest of us weren't trained.
Right. And that's why I said, if they pop back up, okay, but still you want to make sure that person is fine, because they might be at home alone and you just don't know. I mean, not just because of insurance issues, but just, to make sure that somebody's keeping an eye out for them. You definitely want to report that back and tell your volunteers. Again, training is really important. You say, look, if somebody falls, okay, this is the protocol, right? And you need to come up with a protocol of what that is, so that the volunteers are really clear, so that they don't feel kind of left out on a limb, and that they also are doing the best thing for the person that they're trying to help, right?
Yeah.
So it really does come to us as village leaders, or when you're working with an individual, to be able to protect also your organization,
Mhm.
and saying no when there's somebody who is clearly becoming more vulnerable and frailer. And this is very, very difficult, is to tell somebody that you know, no, we cannot do this, or we're very concerned. And I've had to have that conversation numerous times with a couple people. This is not a conversation that you want to have to say. And it's not that somebody will want to hear that, but there is a line. And then having that as a leader, having that discussion with certain people on my board, discussing this is what's going on, I'm reporting this to you, we need to have discussion. So somebody's assigning somebody to go in and check on that member to make sure that things are, what the situation is in that home. And so, it's a very difficult conversation, and we are going to be having those conversations more and more as our membership gets older, because we are it follows the aging of our own village and our infrastructure and our organizations. So,
I mean, and I think that's a topic, right? That those that work with volunteers and the leadership, it's like, how do you feel? How are you going to handle it when you have to say no? Right? I mean, that's a training thing, right? What are the reasons we have to say no? What is it? How does that protect you? How does that protect the member? Because a lot of people have a really hard time saying no. And often volunteers come in as volunteers, and they're good volunteers because they want to be helpful and they're kind, but it's really hard for them to say no.
and then also, if you have an angry member who then knows other neighbors, and then your reputation can be besmirched.
Sure.
And so but you don't want to go into everybody and tell everybody about this person's business. So it's a very nuanced and difficult relationship. And I see Mary nodding your head. It sounds like you've been there too.
One of the things at Stonegate Village is that we do not encourage our volunteers to go in the house for the member. If the member is not mobile enough to get themselves out of the house and to the car, then we have to reconsider whether we can offer them a service. Because how are you going to get them from the car to the doctor's office? There are some services that we can supply without taking the member with us. We can, for example, pick up their medication and bring it to them at their home. They don't have to go to CVS themselves personally. We can take their mail and mail it for them. They don't have to go to the post office. But if they want to ride, and we have a volunteer to take them somewhere, then they need to have the mobility to get out of their own home and to the car. Our volunteer doesn't try to help them down their stairs or whatever.
That's a good point, Linda. One of the other things that we've done to get around this is, if the person is very frail, and they have a professional caregiver, then the caregiver, and oftentimes the caregiver may not have a car, and so they need to be taken to the doctors, and so the member needs to be taken to the doctors. Well, if there's a professional caregiver, the volunteer can drive the caregiver and the member together, and the caregiver is responsible. So we've worked.
We have those situations, and it works quite well, so if someone needs help transferring even from a wheelchair to a car, we're not real comfortable having a volunteer do that, but caregiver is great.
Yeah, I mean, getting somebody in and out of a wheelchair is complicated. You do need to know how to do this properly. And so one would expect that the caregiver, if the person is professional, has that training. So I don't want to dominate. Are
And-
there questions coming from the audience?
Well, and then the other thing too is that knowing what is within your parameter of services, again, will enable you to get better insurance, right? To bring this back to the insurance piece of it, is knowing what it is that you're willing to do and that you're tasking people to do. That information needs to get communicated to your insurance agent. So when it's renewal time, it's really important that you maybe do a bullet point list of, these are the services we provide. These are the services that we tell our volunteers not to provide, right? So that they can better assess what it is, what coverage it is that you do need, right?
So Mary, are there any other points that you've experienced that you would be able to share with the group on sort of those, your experiences in this arena?
Not that I know of, just that we have gone back and forth with regards to no touch policy versus light touch policy, and right now are on a, and it's probably a don't ask, don't tell,
Oh,
you know, which is not good.
yeah.
But you know, someone else had mentioned the issue of, I mean, these are all, you know, adult grown people who can choose to consort with whoever they want. And so for us to say, your neighbor and friend who is now a volunteer to drive you to the doctor can't help you into the car, it gets a little sticky. I do appreciate Emily's suggestion of don't be codependent, you know, that helps me to frame the issue quite a bit. I don't know if it was a change for anyone else, but helped me.
So what do you mean by light touch? Is that
Need
okay?
an arm, you know, that kind of thing. Not I am supporting you as you know, but just, do you need an arm for balance? That would fall under light touch.
That would be okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Very sticky, isn't it?
it is. I
Oh, yeah.
mean, you know,
Humans are.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. I know. Oh, but that we would just fit into neat boxes.
Right, right. No, if it's not this, it's something else, right? So,
That's right. That's
Right. Bill, do you know if any, there have been any issues in the past with any of this historically?
No, Mary, I really don't. A friend, neighbor, Dave Rapp, whose name you probably recognize, does a lot of volunteer work. And next time I see Dave, because we play golf together, I will ask him, having heard these issues, if he you know, has run into any problems or any circumstances that you know, fit into this category. Because I'm curious. I think it's a very interesting subject because it's not digital. It's not yes or no. It's an analog thing of when does no touch, light touch, medium touch, semi-medium touch, don't touch, where touch. I mean,
yes,
my God,
and
there's
plus,
no answer.
plus men are women. Men are very vulnerable to if they're the ones if they're the volunteer. They can be very vulnerable to accusations of assault or any number of things, whether real or not.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which also brings into the attempt to work intergenerationally, because it was very difficult trying to accepting teenagers to work as volunteers, because the concern of sending a teenager over to somebody's house, if they, you know, the safest way to control that was if that it's only external work, so yard work or anything outside the house. and then having an adult there, and having somebody, so the teenager would have to have a parent response. Somebody had to be responsible, so that it made it complicated because you would have to have two people, the volunteer, the kid, plus somebody else who's volunteering to supervise that kid to make sure that nothing else. So it gets very complicated working with intergenerational situations because of the concern on accusations of sexual abuse and impropriety. So we have, I don't know if other people have had issues or other villages have had issues managing or thinking about that. Patricia?
I can say that I'm with Glover Park Village, that we have youths under 18 sometimes volunteering, but like you say, maybe they and their dad are going to do something or whatever. But our insurance company asked us to use a form that we got from them, or the wording we got from them, to have their parents sign, because you can't do a background check
Right.
on them. So just for what that's worth.
Yep. You have to have certain different procedures with minors.
So I found it very hard also trying to explain that to parents who are just, my daughter just wants to do, want to do with it. And as a volunteer, wanting to encourage volunteerism, but having to explain to the parent that they could just not send the child over. It was hard, but orienting it to, we need to just make sure those protections are there for you and your child, as well as, and it's not that we have sketchy membership, it's that we just have to be careful in this day and age. It's very daunting to remain positive and accepting and to do good things and to do good work.
Oh yeah, no, it's complicated.
And we had a volunteer who wanted her teenage daughter to walk dogs for one of our members, and we had to turn her down because the the insurance implications were too much to consider it. And you're right, we felt kind of bad about having to turn them down for that reason.
Was the insurance implication with regard to
that
the dog?
We would have been required to acquire additional insurance to have a minor doing volunteer work.
So,
And there are some complexities about dogs.
Yeah.
sitting. I'm going, oh, I think there was pet sitting and plant watering that we used to do. So.
Yeah, our volunteers
Plants are really dangerous.
So are there any more questions, or because we're about time to wrap up now?
Been very, very helpful. Yes.
Good session.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate Emily for coming and speaking.
Oh, no
Thank you,
problem.
Emily.
Sorry if y'all wanted the insurance guys.
No, we want you.
Fabulous.
You're great.
So
Hey,
thank you. And thank you all for attending and for all your work and keeping the mission and the villages alive. Sorry, Emily.
And then my contact information, if you want me to ask me anything else, you can always just go to the Village of Tacoma Park, and my name is under the, contact us, and you'll be able to get an email address that you can reach me.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all.
Okay.